Hello and welcome everybody, this is Roland Hartmann from graphicINmotion.com and it is tutorial time again. In this tutorial I will show you how to create this nice medical scene that we see here, and therefore we will use the 3D models that come now with Stardust. So this is a new feature, the 3D library, and we'll take a look how to use these models. So let's jump right into After Effects and let's get started. In After Effects, I will first of all create a new composition, and as always I will use the HDTV25 preset, and I will set this to about 10 seconds of duration. Now let's create a new layer, and let's call this Stardust. And let's add the Stardust effect to this layer. Okay. So now we have a few particles emitting here. And now we'll set up my scene quickly. So I will add a new camera. So let's add a new camera, and I will just use a standard 30mm camera for that. And now I also want to add in a light. And actually I want to add in two lights. First of all, I want to add in a point light. And I will just set this to 100% intensity. And I will also add in an ambient light. And this will just help me to brighten up the whole scene a little bit, and I will set this to 15%. So I have two lights here. So now we can delete the emitter and this particle node here, because we actually do not need these right now. I want to work with models now. And to do that, I could just use the new 3D library that is now included in Stardust. And to access that, you can just open up the preset browser. So let's just open this up by clicking on these symbols. And you see now you have this option here to download the 3D library. And please be aware that this is not available in the trial version. You have to own a full version of Stardust to access the 3D library. Then you can download it and install it in the same path where all the other presets are installed on your system. And then you will see this 3D library folder right here. And if we open this up, you see that we have a bunch of different elements here. And in my case, I want to work and take a look at the science folder. And here we have the biology folder, and you see that we have blood cells and a virus and another virus cell and different things that we can use now. And there is also already a vein included here. So now if I select this and click add here, then this will be added to my scene. And by default, you see that it's not really visible, and this is because of the size of the model. So let's choose this model and let's go to the model properties, and let's just increase the size here a little bit. And now our vein is visible. And if I go to my active camera and change this to custom view, then you see what this is. This is more or less just a cylinder warped around a path, and it has no caps, so we can see into it. And we could use this now to create our vein scene. But actually I want to show you how you can create something like this from scratch, because there's another new feature that I want to demonstrate, and this is how you can wrap a model along a light path. So let's create our own blood vein from scratch. And therefore I just delete this for now, and I will add in a model node. And with this model node now, let's change this to primitive, and I want to use a cylinder here. So now if I increase the size here, then you will see it. I have this cylinder. Let's set this for now to 450 on X, and maybe like 500 on Y. I can change this later on anyway. And I want to increase the segments a little bit because I want to have a few more here. So 48 times 48, just for now. We will take a look at this later. And now we have to create a path, a light path, that we use to wrap or to deform our cylinder. Therefore I create a new light. And in this case I will just use a point light. And I will call this my vein path. Now with this selected, let me just change this from custom view to top view, because it's a bit easier here to work with it. And my light is right here. Let me take a look where my camera is. And actually I want my light path to start directly on my camera position. So I can just use this position and copy this over and copy it to my vein path light. Here it is. Just paste this in here. And now my light sits exactly in the same spot as my camera. And this is the point where I want to start my path. So now with my time indicator on frame 0, I will set a keyframe for the position of our wane path light. And now let's move forward for about 1 second, doesn't really matter. And let's create a path. So we'll just move this back on Z. And then I will just move it over on X a little bit. And with these handles here now, I can create a nice smooth curve. So let's say something like this should be fine. Nothing too fancy here, just a little light path here. Okay, good. Now let's go back to our Stardust layer and let's add a Deform node, and this is that one here, to our model. And this will be our path deformation, so I will just rename this to Path Deform, just that I know what this is doing. And now I can change the type from noise to path. Now I have to specify which path or which light this deformer looks at. And we have this option here to choose starting with. And if I open this up, now it is set to all. So it will take a look at all light paths that are in my scene. But I want to make sure that it only looks at this specific light here. And therefore we can just type in that it should look at all lights that start with a V. Okay. And you see now my cylinder disappeared. So it does something, but it does not what I want right now. And this is because of these orientations here. So first of all, I want to select stretch to path, because that's what I want to do anyway. And now I have to change the axis here. So my up axis should be the X axis. And I will change this now to custom view that you see what's happening here. And now we have this strange blob here. And this is because the front axis is not Z, but Y. And if I change this now, you see what is happening. And let me actually just move my camera out a bit. And now you see, if I select my point light and move it back, that my cylinder now gets wrapped along the path of my light. So let's make sure I will put my light inside this cylinder now. So let's put it in here. Now it's inside the cylinder. And if I change back to my active camera now, you see it's not really looking right. So I have to change one more setting. And this is on the model node in the model properties. We have to change our model to be double-sided. That means that it will also display the inner side of our model. And now you see what we have got here. And now you see that we are inside this tunnel that I created. And the cool thing is that this is totally procedural. So if you take a look at this end here, it doesn't really look good. So let me go back to my top view here and let me play a little bit more with this wane path light. And actually, I just didn't create a nice path here, so it doesn't look good. So let me just improve this a bit. Like so. Create a nice curve here. Maybe not even so far, something like that. A little bit smoother, because I want to make sure that I do not see the end cap of my cylinder. So let's go back to our active camera. You see, I still can see it. So let's go to top again and let's just improve this a bit. So let's make it like so. Okay, now let's go back to the active camera and you see now we have this nice curve here and I do not see the end cap anymore. Now let's go to our model node and I can change the size here. Let's take a look. Maybe it is a little bit too big. I could scale it down. Now it gets too small, but maybe something like 300, 350 is okay. Looks quite good. Okay, so far so good. Now I want to make this look a little bit more organic, and therefore we can use another deform node. So let's add another deform node and let's link this up here. And this time I want to use my noise deform, and so I will call this noise deform. Okay, And I will just increase the position offset here. Not too much. You see, maybe something like, let's start with a value of 15, so a slight offset. And now let's change the scale here and let's lower this a little bit, maybe to 30. Doesn't look too bad. Maybe increase this a bit, 25. No, that's too much. So let's say 17, like so. And I can come back to my model node and make sure that the smooth normals is turned on. This will smooth out this deformation a little bit. And I can also increase the angle here. So I can increase this to maybe 120, and this will just smooth it out even more. And I think that this does not look too bad. Could now come in here and change the scale a little bit further. Let's see how this looks like. And I think that this looks really good. So something like 460, not too much though, in strength. Just to make it a bit more organic. And this looks really cool. Okay, so far so good. Now we created our vein, and one more step is to add a material. And let's just create a material node and link it up directly to our model. And now in this diffuse here, first of all, let's set the color from particle to 0, because I do not want this to take over any particle colors. We do not have particles in our scene right now. I want to specify the color just with this color option here. So let's make this blue. I know that a vein is probably not blue inside. And if it is, then you probably have some health issues. But just in this case, for the visualization, we will use this blue color because it looks really cool. Okay, so far so good. So now I created my vein and I created a bit of deformation. Now I will add another light to the scene just to make this look a little bit more interesting. And therefore I go back to my top view and let's see. First of all, I want to make sure that my vein light is turned off because I do not want this to cast any lighting. But I will duplicate my point light and I will just move these back on set, and I will make sure that it is still inside my vein and move it over to this side maybe. And now let's just duplicate this again and let's move the third one here back, and let's just move this over here just around the corner, because then we can control the backlighting of our vein here a little bit better. So something like that. And if I go back to the active camera now, you see that I have way more lights here now in my scene, and this looks quite good. And we can play around with these later on and create a nice lighting in my scene. Now they're all a bit too strong. It's blowing out a little bit. So let's reduce all of these maybe to 85. That we do not get these blowouts here. Okay, so I've got my 3 lights here. And you see that this is the backlight actually right here. That is right behind the corner. And we can position that to create a nice backlighting here. And we can also later on maybe reduce this a bit and balance these a bit further. But for now, this is good. But let me change one more thing right now, and this is in the material settings. If I open up the roughness settings, you see that it is not really rough, and we have these highlights here. And you will probably not get this inside a vein. In an organic material like this, we probably will not have these reflections. So I will just set the roughness to 100. And then it looks better. Okay, now it's time to add a few particles, and this is actually pretty easy because we already have a path in our scene, and we can use this path to emit particles from. So now I create an emitter and I create a particle node, link these two together. And in my case, I want to emit models, so I will change the particle shape from circle to model. And I also want them to live the whole animation, or so the whole duration here, 10 seconds. And you see by default now it is emitting some cubes. Now we have to change the emitter settings, and we do not want to emit from a point, we want to emit from a light. And now we have the same option here to start with, and we want to start here again with our vein light. So let's put in here a V. Okay. And you see what's happening now. Now it's emitting particles along our animation here. And the animation is 1 second long, so it follows this light, and you see that a few particles here are emitted. Now there are not enough particles, that's obvious, so let's increase the number here quite a bit. Something like, let's see, 2800 looks quite good. And what I want to do is I want to decrease the speed over life, because you see now they keep spreading, and I just want to limit this a little bit so that they stay within the vein here. First of all, I want to increase the speed that they are spreading out a little bit faster in the beginning, so I will set this to 200. But then I want to reduce the speed over life. So let's take a look here at about, frame 45. I want them to really, really slow down and only move a little bit. So let's go to speed over life and let's add in a graph here. And the interesting thing with the speed over life is that if you set this to a value of 0, if I make this a little bit bigger, that we see what's happening here. Here you see the value and here you see the life, which is percent actually. Then it will just reverse. So if I take a look now, you see that they are now spreading out, and at some point at around 27% of their lifetime, they will just move back. And this is not what we want. And this is because value of 0 works like something like -1. So I want this to be just in the middle, which is 50, but actually the 0 point, or nearly 50, so just a little bit above, maybe 52, 50, 51, so that they have still a little bit of speed, but not that much. And I also want to bring this in now to a short amount. So 10% would be around 1 second. So this is probably, this is too early. So let's move this to maybe 15 or 20%. Let's see what will work here. Now we have 16%. And you see now they are nicely spread. And I really think that it looks quite good, but I want to give them a little bit more time to spread. So let's set this to 20 with a value of 51. And I think that this is exactly what I want. Yeah, that looks good for now. And you see that after this point in time now, when they stop, then they move a little bit further, but very slowly. And this is exactly what I want. So now let's just set our endpoint of our composition to frame 70. Press B on the keyboard to bring this in, because we do not need this part here where they are spreading. I just want to start the animation right here when they are already nicely spread out and just moving slowly. Now with our particles here, we can change these a bit and make them a bit more interesting. So first of all, let's take a look at the rotation properties here. And I want to give them a random angle here. And I also want them to have a little bit of speed. So let's set this to 5, or maybe, I think 5 could be too much. Let's say 3 for now, and a random speed of maybe 50. And if I take a look now and create a quick run preview, we will see what this is doing and how fast these are really spinning. I want them to float and not to spin too fast, so it should be gentle. Let's take a look here. And I think this looks pretty good. Okay. Now it's time to bring in some of our 3D models and replace our cubes with our 3D models. And this is actually very simple, again, using the new 3D assets. So let's open up the browser. Let's go to our 3D library. Let's go to our science folder, biology, and let's bring in this blood cell number 1 here, and let's add it to the scene. It's important that you click add. If you click replace, then everything is gone. So let's click add here. And you see now we have this model node in here. And it also has a material node applied. And if you take a look at your project, then there are also some maps added. And actually there are still these maps added that were created when I created the vein. And I do not use this vein, so I can actually really delete these. And now I only have this for the blood cell that I need. Okay, now let's link this to our particle node. And you see immediately everything is messed up, and this is just because the models are a bit too big for now. So let's go to our model node here, and let's change this in the model properties. Let's change the size to something like, let's see, I think we can go down very low to 5 maybe, even further, 3, so that they are nice and small in the beginning. Okay, and now let's take a look at something really cool. You see that it looks good, but it doesn't look like my preview. And this is because I did not turn on Subsurface Scattering now. And this is also a new feature and really cool. So let's take a look at that. So first of all, let's take a quick look at the material of these red cells here. It's a material node, standard material node. And you see that we have this option now, Subsurface Scattering. And you see that this is already set to an amount of 180. It has some scatter value and it has a density. But it doesn't really do anything now. Right now, they look just like normal materials, solid materials. And this is because inside the Stardust render settings, we have to activate the Subsurface Scattering. And you see that there is this tab here, Subsurface Scattering, and we can turn this on. And as soon as I turn this on, you see what's happening. Now our light is shining through these blood cells and creating this really, really nice effect. And depending where you position your light, you see that this gets intense, more intense, or a little bit less, like here. But really, really cool effect. And we can also do this actually on our vein model. And let's select this material here. And let's go to the subsurface scattering here as well. And let's just set this to the same value. So let's put in here 180. And it will not do so much. You see, it's gentle, but it really looks cool and makes it a bit more organic, a bit more translucent, and just adds really to the look of this scene. Okay, so far so good. Now let's bring in a few more of these cells, because right now we have all the same cells all over, and this is not very natural. So let's just shift this a bit. First of all, I will move this over here, and I will just oops, now it deleted the connection. So let's reattach this. I will just make some room here. And again, I will add another model from the 3D library. So let's open this up. Let's go to the 3D library, to science, biology, and let's add blood cell number 2 to our scene and bring it over here and link it up. And now you see what will happen. Again, they are too big. So let's go to our model properties, and I set the other one to 3, so I will set this to a little bit of different value, maybe 2.8, just something different. And now what is happening if I select this model and if I turn this off for now by clicking this eye, you see that nothing is happening. So they are obviously in the same spot, existing in the same spot in the particles. And this is because of this one setting that you have in the particles. If you go to the particle node and if you take a look at use models, and if you choose random, then we will have some distribution now, because if you use all, then it will just use all models that you add here on each particle. But we want these to be distributed randomly to our particles. It was not really that obvious now, but if I add another model, this will become way more obvious. So let me show you this quickly. And therefore, I will just go to the 3D library again and choose science, and will choose this virus here. And I will just add this to the scene. And if I link this now, some of my particles will now be replaced by this virus. Again, it is too big. So in my model settings, model properties, let's turn this down to maybe 4. And let's see how this looks like. Doesn't look too bad. We have quite a bunch of viruses in here now. So the person that we see here is actually pretty sick. So let's change this a little bit. I'll need a bit more blood cells. So I will add another blood cell. But what I wanted to show you, the difference between these to make this obvious, is if I change this from random to all, then you see that now every model is attached to each particle in the scene. And if I change this to random, then it will just distribute the models randomly to the particles. And this is exactly what we want to achieve. Okay, now let's go to our library once again. And let's add the third blood cell here. Add this to the scene. Go into the model node and change the size here to, let's say, 3.2. And link it to our particles. And now a few of these will again be replaced with blood cells. Okay, so this looks pretty good. And now I can come in here and you can now change the distribution by just shifting the seed. And you can say you can out direct this a little bit. So if you want to have a little bit more blood cells like now, not so many of these viruses, then you can shift this a bit and change it until you get something that you like. I think this looks pretty cool because here we have something right in front of the camera. So for now, I will just leave it at this distribution. What I do not like here, actually, I do not like the color of my virus. I want this to be bluish. I can easily change this. So let's go to our material. And this is the material of my virus here, right? This. And you see that in our diffuse channel, we have this virus material. And if we take a look here, and you see all these textures here were added to my scene. They're included in the 3D library and they are used by these material nodes. But I want to change the virus diffuse texture. So let's see color here, this one. It's only a green texture. So I will just change this, and I do not want to use a texture here. So I will set this to none. And now I can use the color wheel here, the color option, and I will just set this to a little bit similar as my vein, maybe a bit of a different turn here, so a little bit brighter, something like that. And that doesn't look too bad. It's a bit too bright, so let's go back here. Just like so. Let's take a look. Not quite there. I just need a bit more blue, a bit more saturation. Okay, this looks better. Okay, so far so good. Now to make this look even better, we have to adjust the lighting a little bit. So let's play around with our lights a little bit. So I will just close down everything here and I will go to my lights. Point light number 1, let's take a look where this is. I changed to 4 views, makes it a little bit easier. And this is right here beside my camera, and if I move this over a bit, maybe I get a little bit more interesting shading right here. Let's take a look. Yeah, looks a bit more interesting. Then let's choose the second light here, and I want to increase the fall off distance of this one here. So let's increase this a little bit so that we get a little bit more light from this one here to brighten up the scene a little bit. That looks quite good. And I will decrease the intensity of my backlight here, so to make it a little bit darker in the background, maybe to 50. And you see that will now, yeah, this is just making it a bit more, or a bit darker here in the back. And you can play around with this and create an even better lighting, but for now I'm satisfied with this. Now I want to improve the look even further here, so let's go to our one view active camera. And let's change, first of all, my depth of field, because I think that the focus point is not in the right point. It's too far back. I think 500 maybe, bring it in front, closer to the camera. And this looks quite good, but now I do not like the seed. So let's go back to our particles here and change the seed a bit so that this one goes away here. It's a bit of, it's blocking kind of the side here, so let's just change this, maybe 100. Let's see what this is. Not too bad, not too bad. Now the focus point is right here. I need it to be in front here, so let's just decrease this even further, 300. Now we are just behind this one, so let's bring it to 260. And now we have the focal point exactly here on this virus. And this looks quite cool, actually. I could decrease the aperture a bit, maybe to something like 10. Then it's not so intense, our depth of field. So the blurriness is not so intense. I could decrease this even further, maybe to 5. Let's take a look what this does. And I think that this looks a little bit better. Okay, so for now, I really like this. Now, the next step is to add a few more particles in here and to make this a little bit more interesting. And therefore, I just want to add a few sphere particles. And to do that, we will just add an emitter. And I will add a particle node to my scene, link these up. And to make my life easier now, I will just use this emitter. set it to box. Now let's increase the size of this box, maybe to 200. Let's see whether this is enough. No, it's not enough. We need 400. It's not enough. Let's say 600. And we will increase it here also 500. And then we will increase it on set, for example, like 2000. Let's see what this does. And this will now spread these points all over the place. And this is exactly what I want. But now I want to increase the particles per second to about 400 to fill this up a little bit. Now let's go to our particles. Let's turn down the size and we will go to particle properties. Let's turn them down so that they're really small. Maybe to 2. Let's see. Yeah, that looks good. And I also want these to be feathered, so I can change the particle feather amount to 100. And this will reduce the size a bit. It looks really good. And I want these to be added here. Okay, and now give them some random speed, like 50, and maybe also decrease the overall speed to 60. Let's take a look, and I will just solo this for a moment, and I will also solo this, that I only have these particles visible. I just want to make a quick round preview how they move. Let me take a look here. Not too bad, but a little bit too fast. So let's go to the emitter. Let's bring this down to, let's say, 30. And let's take a look now. And this looks better. Yep, this is quite good. And now inside the particles, just to make this a bit smoother, I will increase their lifespan to 3 seconds. And I will randomize the size, let's say 75%. And I will also change the opacity over life. So let's go to the over life settings, and in the opacity, I will just add a preset, and I will just use this one here, the fade in and out Bezier, and apply this. And now let's take a look what this does. Now it's just a bit smoother, transitioning, fading on, fading off, wobbling around, looks quite good. Okay, so let's unsolo these two again. And let's take a look how all of this looks together, and it looks really good. But I just want to reduce the opacity a bit, maybe to 50, so that they are not fully opaque, like so. And I'm satisfied with this now. Okay, so you see that this already looks pretty good, but now I want to increase this look even further, and I want to give it this kind of faded, like they are traveling inside a fluid and or in water. And you see that in the background everything is pretty clear, and I just want to fade this out a bit. So let's go to our project here, and you see that I have my comp number 1. This is the comp that I created. And I want to pre-compose my comp number 1. So let's just drag this composition right over the composition icon down here to create a pre-comp. And now we'll just call this my main comp. And inside my main comp, I will move again to frame 60, bring in my in point. And now I want to duplicate this composition inside my project window to create a new one here. So this will be comp number 2 now. And I open this up. And with this comp now, let's move down to the Stardust layer. And let's go to our render settings. And in the render settings, you see we have the render output here. And I can change this now from render to depth. And if I change this to depth, you see what we've got here. Now we have this kind of depth matte. And we can use this now to manipulate the opacity of my main composition. I will show you this in a moment. But before we do that, let me just tweak this a little bit. And we can tweak the look here by using the clipping. So let's open up the clipping. And now I will just decrease the maximum distance to something small. So you see, when I bring this in, then the background gets really dark. And using this as a matte in the next step means that dark will be transparent. So to make this a little bit more obvious, I will just show you this now. I will just put in some values here, 2500 on the max fade and 3250 on the max distance. Now let's go to our main composition. And let's bring in our comp number 2 here on top of my comp number 1. And you see what's happening here. Now it's just overlaying this. But if I set my second comp, or comp number 2, my second layer here, now to Luma Matte, you will see what's happening. Yes, everything looks awful now. Okay, but in a moment we will correct this. So what we have now is we have some transparency here in this scene. So I can create a new solid now. And this will be my background, so I call it BG. And I can just take over a color here, maybe this one here for now. Okay. And move it, of course, right on the bottom of my composition. And you see what we've got now. So it's not perfect, it doesn't look great because I have to tweak this a little bit more. But you already see that now this is, so if I turn off the matte here to no track matte, you see now we have this visible until the end here, very clearly visible. But if I set this now to Luma Matte, you see that it gets like in a fog or like in a fluid. It disappears here in the background. This is exactly the effect that I want to achieve, but it's not very well set up right now. So first of all, we can change the color of this background layer because this is actually very important here, how this looks like. So we'll add a fill here and you will see what this does in a moment. Interesting look, but not what I'm after. So I will just take over again one of these colors here. And now I will play with this to make this look good. So let's make it a little bit brighter. Not too much though. A little bit more saturated, something like that. Now it looks really like a fluid. And we can do one more thing. We can just tweak this a bit further. So I think that it is a bit too harsh. So let me bring this back or increase the max distance a bit, maybe to 4000. And let's see what this does. Maybe even further, 4500. And you see that now it gets a little bit more subtle, this effect, and so does our fog effect. But I think that this looks really good. Okay, so as a last step to really polish this, let's add a new adjustment layer. And on top of everything, and let's add a Lumetri color correction effect. And I will just play with this a little bit to make this look even more interesting. And first of all, we will just do a basic color correction, and I will increase the exposure a little bit, maybe by 0.3 to brighten up the whole scene a little bit. And now I want to increase the contrast a little bit, maybe by 15. Like so. Gets better and better. And now you could give it some creative color correction, and this is way too much, but a little bit of that could help to sell this effect, maybe something like that. So let's see before and after, and you see we're already increasing this look and making it very way more interesting. But the main influence on the look is created by the lights and the position and intensity of the lights. So you can spend a bit more time positioning the lights and creating a really nice scene here. Okay, so this is it for the tutorial. Let's create a quick run preview that we see what we have got in the end, and I will be back when the run preview is finished. Okay, the run preview is finished, and you see that the outcome is very nice. Everything is floating around, rotating smoothly, and I really like it. Okay, this is it with the tutorial. I hope that you liked it, that you learned some new techniques, and that you realized how powerful these new 3D models are that are now included with Stardust, and that you can really create cool scenes with these within a very short amount of time, which was definitely not that easily possible in After Effects before that. So if you have any questions, then please feel free to post them in the comments. You can also contact me through my website, which is www.graphicINmotion.com. Thank you very much for watching, and I really hope to see you soon. Goodbye.